Hello, everybody. So there we go. All right. Can everybody hear me okay? All right. So I'm a little nervous about where to start because it's been a long time since I've actually done a public presentation. But today my topic is Hinduism the universal religion? And before I get to that, I want to talk about how I came to this tradition because I, like many of you, I grew up in suburban America with, a Christian background. And so it may seem like kind of a leap to go from, suburban Christianity to the other side of the world to India. So a little bit about my story. I was born, that's not really me, as a baby. As I grew up, I was raised in the Catholic Church, and being in the Catholic Church, there was a lot of questions that came to my mind. The biggest thing was, they teach this doctrine of love, but they also teach this doctrine of extreme punishment. So that kind of brought out this rebellious nature in myself, which you can see by my punk rock phase. And from there, I learned a very important lesson. There's a band called Operation Ivy, and they have a song called Knowledge. And the chorus of the song is, all I know is I don't know nothing. And, it just reminds me to always be humble and to always be a student, to always be in that state of mind of openness and receptiveness and learning. And so from there, I kind of kept an open mind, and I ended up exploring different paths and traditions. And I ended up going to India and traveling all over the world and America. And then I came back to implement what I learned through practice of mental health and substance abuse as a nurse. So setting the stage, like I said, I was raised, under the constructs of the Catholic Church. My mom, she was very, very devout in her belief. And, left and right, you're told how much Jesus loves you, but if you don't accept Jesus, you're going to go to hell and suffer forever. And I said, but Mom, what about the Jewish people? They're God's chosen people. Are they going to go to hell? What about people that never heard of Jesus? Are they going to go to hell? And she didn't really have those answers. And so I also began to wonder, if my parents love me and they can't even punish me for like a week, for something bad that I did, how can God, who's supposed to be this infinite love that loves us so much more, punish us for eternity? It just didn't make any sense to me whatsoever. So I began searching for something else. It was probably about sixth grade. I said, I need to find something else out there. At the time, I was really starting to get into heavy metal music. And a lot of the bands I listened to, they practiced Wicca and witchcraft. And I was like, oh, this is cool. It's edgy. Let me get into it. So I started researching it and learning about it. But in the process, that Catholic guilt kind of lingered. And I was like, oh, no, it's the devil. What am I doing? And all this fear kind of crept in. So I said, I got to find something else. I can't really handle this. So I began looking into other religions, and I was kind of drawn to the Eastern path. So one of the first religions I looked up and I came across was Sikhism. And it turns out it's one of my most favorite and beloved traditions. But at the time, I was reading about it. It's like 10 gurus, this holy book. What is this? This is too much. I don't understand this. Forget it. And I was like, well, everybody talks about Buddhism. Let me read this. And I was like, oh, this is interesting. There's some good points. But I don't know, I felt more confused than when I started the process. So I just kind of said, you know what, forget it. I'm going to throw my hands up. I know there's something out there. I'm just going to let the universe show me what it will. So time goes by, I go to college, and I have this awesome roommate named Chris, who's in a heavy metal rock and roll band. And he opened me up to a lot of really cool ideas and possibilities. And one night we were hanging out, we were bored, we didn't really have anything to do. So he said, hey, let's go visit this old hippie Dave. He's always interesting. And I said, all right, let's go for it. So we drive over to Dave's house, and not really knowing what to expect other than he's an old hippie. He fulfilled all of the stereotypes. And so we just got there, we started hanging out with him and just talking about like philosophy and things like that. And, Chris, he's very forward. He doesn't have very good boundaries, which is one of the things that I loved about him because he just seems so charismatic and out there. And so he just goes up, he starts digging through Dave's bookshelf, and he pulls out two books. He pulls out a book with the art of Salvador Dali, and then he pulls out another book called Be Here Now, which many of you may be familiar with. And that was written by Harvard professor Richard Alpert, who later became Ram Dass. And so my roommate had this book sitting in his room, and we were having a party at his house one night, and I wasn't really feeling the party vibe, so I kind of closed myself up in the room and I started looking through this book. And if any of you have seen this book before, it's filled with all of this beautiful artwork, and it kind of takes you through the first part of the book is Richard Alpert's story. Then it takes this esoteric metaphysical journey of self, and then it kind of gives you the cookbook for sacred living. And so I kind of flipped through the book, and it just really stayed with me and resonated with me. After my first year of college, I was kind of at a turning point. I didn't want to continue going to school. At that time, I was studying political sciences. I didn't really know if I wanted to continue that. I was having a hard time figuring out what was going on. I was having fights with my mom, you know, just typical teenage strife. And I was really praying for guidance. So I said, well, let me get that book, Be Here Now. So I went to the bookstore, I picked it up, and that day I read it cover to cover. I finished it just as the sun was setting, and I said, yes, I need more of this yoga stuff in my life. At the time, I had a lot of bad habits, and so learning that you can, you know, get these altered states of consciousness and states of mind through yoga and breath work and things, it was kind of like a revelation and an eye-opening experience for me. And with that, I began to explore the yogic path. And through that process, I began to try and connect with the teachers that Ram Dass spoke about in this book. So the first person I connected to was Ram Dass's guru named Purli Baba. And he has touched my life in such a profound and amazing way. I really, he really came into my life when I was really starting to go down this path. I called up another roommate and said, I'm thinking of joining this particular Hindu organization. I feel really called to this path. I want to become a renunciate, and I want to join this tradition. And my roommate, he was another roommate that I had, knowing a lot more about this path and this tradition, he said, really stay away from them. There's a lot of controversies. Some people consider them cult-like. I don't want to see you get wrapped up in all that stuff and lose yourself. And at that moment, I felt so devastated because I felt like I'd finally found my path. I finally found what called to my heart, you know, what really drew me closer to God and Spirit. And I said, please, God, I need help. You know, so I remembered Named Purli Baba in this moment. And this was the very first picture that I saw of him. And as soon as I saw this photo of him, I felt this sense of peace and love wash over me. I felt completely at ease. And if you know anything about him, or if you've seen any pictures of him, he didn't have any possessions. He would just wear like a dhoti, which is like a very thin fabric around his waist, and he had a blanket with him. And his followers always talk about being under his blanket. And so in that moment, I felt as if like this warm blanket came over me and just kind of embraced me. And he's always been there, a constant thread throughout my life from that moment on. And so I said, all right, you're my guy. I'm going to follow you, and you're going to lead me to the path. And so from there, I've said, you know, I know you have followers in the area. I want you to open my heart to find them. And I was connected to a beautiful Hanuman temple that's also dedicated to him in Collegeville, Pennsylvania. One of the guys there said, I don't know why I'm going on this Facebook thing. I've never heard of it before, but I needed to find devotees of Named Purli Baba. And, you know, you're the only one I found. So come to our temple. So from there, things just started unfolding. I decided I wanted to go deeper into my yogic path. And I remember reading about Baba Haridas in Ram Dass's book, Be Here Now. And Baba Haridas helped build a lot of temples in India. And then he came over to California, I think in the 60s or 70s, and started his own school of yoga there with his followers. And to my surprise, he was still alive and his school was running and it was very successful. So in 2008, I went out there and I spent probably about a month and a half there in the community doing an intensive yoga training and then volunteering afterwards. And that was a really beautiful, beautiful time in my life, a beautiful experience. And he's the one that gifted me with the name Maruti Nandan. Now, Maruti Nandan is the name of the Hindu deity Hanuman, who's an incarnation of Shiva. I'll kind of get into the main deities a little bit later, but he's my preferred Ishta Deva. He's my preferred incarnation of God. Hanuman represents selfless service, love, and devotion. And he's also known as like a warrior, and he just has this ideal of service, you know, and to me that really stood out, and I thought that was a really beautiful thing. And right before leaving for yoga school to go see Baba Haridas, I was blessed with these two beautiful souls to come into my life. I was reading the Creating Community magazine, and I saw that Amma Karunamaya was coming to Warrington, Pennsylvania at the Unitarian Church, and there's a meditation program with Shivabali Yogi. And I said, oh, I'm going to study yoga. I got to go see these people. And I didn't really know much about these teachers. I thought Amma Pranamaye was the world famous Amma Nanda Mritmaye, the hugging Amma. And I said, oh my gosh, this hugging Amma is coming to our little town. I have to go see her. So I went to go see her. And from the moment I saw her, I was just kind of blown away. I got there a little bit late and I see this little lady sitting up front talking about the earth being this precious blue jewel. We have to take care of her. And something was just kind of resonating within me when I saw her. When I got to go before her, she told me things about myself that nobody else knew. And when she touched me, I just felt the surge of energy move through my body. And she said, I welcome you to India this year, my son. And in my mind, I said, I don't even have enough money to go to yoga school. How the heck am I going to go to India? This is ridiculous. So I kind of put that aside. And also that week, I was initiated into Shivabali Yogi's meditation called Dhyan meditation. I was initiated through another teacher, but probably 6 months later, I heard about Swami Ken and realized that I was already initiated into this lineage with Shivabali Yogi. And so these are my main teachers. And I wanted to just kind of share them, and you could see some quotes from them on there. And they've really impacted my path and my tradition. So Hinduism is not actually called Hinduism. It's a misnomer and a mispronunciation that we can thank the Persians for. So the name actually comes from the Sindhu River, but the Persians didn't have the pronunciation for that, so it became Hindu. Now, other people interpret it as Hindu being from the Himalayas to the Indus Valley, so coming together to make Hindu. But the actual name is Sanatana Dharma, or the Eternal Way. And this is one of the world's oldest religion. It's the third largest in the world with 1.2 billion followers. And what I love about this religion is it's a deeply personal experience, not only for yourself, but for your community. Every family has their own unique practices. You go to one village, they may have a special holiday that's not celebrated 5 villages away. And what makes this religion so beautiful is it's a coming together of all these traditions under a single umbrella. And the idea is everything is God. Everything comes from God's source, from oneness. There's nothing outside of God. Everything is God. I like to think of this in terms of my Christian foundation in Genesis. You know, they say in the beginning there was the word, or there was God, and then God spoke and manifested creation. The way I look at this is like God being like a self-constructing set of Legos or something floating out in the ethers. You know, there's nothing else. It just all kind of put itself together and pulled itself into all these little pieces and spun it out into the universe. So I kind of look at that. So when you see all the stuff going on in the world, you know, you see like the good and the bad, the ups and the downs. In India, they call this God's Leela, or God's play. And when we can learn to look at the world from the perspective that everything is God, just playing with God for the sake of experience, then every experience becomes sacred and beautiful. You know, the suffering that we experience makes the joy and the love so much better and so much brighter. You know, and it's always this constant ebb and flow. And through it all, the idea is to realize the unity and oneness of everything. So one more thing before I jump into the major texts. In Hinduism, I'm sure many of you guys have heard the chanting of Om before. Now, in the Bible, you know, they say the beginning was the word, and Om represents the sound of creation. It's the sound of everything. So for me, that's kind of how I equate it. You know, if you were able to stand back, zoom out far enough and get away from everything, you can just kind of tap in and listen, you would hear the sound of Om just kind of reverberating throughout the cosmos. And to me, that's like the original sound of creation. That's the sound of everything together coming into oneness. And that's what makes it a very powerful mantra that's chanted before most major prayers. So within Sanatana Dharma, there's some major texts. So the first of which is the Vedas. The Vedas were composed about, I think, 1000 to 1500 BC, but they have a very long oral tradition. So the first Veda, which is the oldest, the Rig Veda, it's a collection of hymns. And the very first hymn in there is actually honoring the god of fire, Agni. And it basically says, you know, without you, you know, we wouldn't have anything that we have. And so in many of the rituals, fire is an honored guest. You know, it's like a messenger between the spirit world and the physical world. I was recently listening to a teacher speak, and he talked about doing fire ceremony and fire ritual. And he said you want to offer sweet things to the fire because it'll amplify and magnify your offerings 100 times. So today, according to my teacher, Amakrunamaye, is a day to worship the goddess Chandi through fire ceremony. So, and I'm thinking about all these holidays on here, and I'm reminded when one of my spiritual mentors, Dr. Kadara, was preparing for a puja or worship service at the temple, and he handed me a list of all the Hindu holidays for the year. Every month was filled with holidays every single day. And I said, Dr. Kadara, there's so many holidays here. And he said, well, that's to be expected. God should be worshipped and honored every day. And what I like about it is in Hinduism, there's so many different aspects of God. In the Judeo-Christian and Islamic traditions, there's only really the fatherly figure of God. You know, God, the Father, the boss, the supreme, that's it. You can only come to him as like a humble child. Please, Father, forgive me for what I have done. And then in Christianity, you have Mother Mary, who's like a loving, compassionate side, but that's kind of the limitation of it. You know, you have Jesus, who's like a friend, a brother, but he's also like a, you know, it's still kind of like a one type of relationship. Where in Hinduism, they look at God on a much more personal level. So some people see God as a father or a mother. Others view God as a lover, you know, and they dedicate themselves heart and soul, and in their mind, they become married to God. There's many followers of Krishna that are known for this, and I'll kind of talk about that a little bit later. You know, and then there's other people that dedicate themselves to other aspects of God, you know, and what's beautiful about this tradition is masculine and feminine are equally representative. You have schools that say that the divine feminine is the supreme reality and there's nothing beyond the divine feminine. And then you have the other side that says, no, this side is more divine, and they all come together. You know, they all like find their path and they all interconnect. And every story about all these deities in Hinduism, they're all interconnected and they're all linked in some way. So up here on the screen is just some of the major texts here. So you have the Vedas, you know, which are the hymns, the rituals, chants, and mantras. The Upanishads, which are a collection of texts that contain philosophical principles. And then there's Smriti, which are texts that kind of came throughout time. And so it has epic poems like the Ramayana and the Mahabharata. And I'll talk about the Mahabharata in a little bit. And then there's also the Sastras, which are like collections of sciences. So they have like Ayurvedic science, chemistry. And so India has developed this culture of great enlightenment throughout the ages. And I think part of that is from the way that their society was composed in the ancient days. So as my understanding goes, in the ancient days of India, you had these sections of life. So you're basically born and you spend the first years of your life at home with your mother and your father in a family environment. From 5 till about 18, you go to what's called a gurukul. So you go and study with a teacher or a master. And from there, you learn like your spiritual foundations. If you're going to learn a trade or something like that, you'll also study that with them. And then at that point, you have a choice. You can either become a householder and start a family, or you renounce the world and become a renunciate. And within this tradition, it's a responsibility and a duty of the householders, the ones that are active in supporting society, to support the spiritual seekers. So those that renounce the world are actually sponsored and supported by the householders. So, you know, that's through giving donations. You know, farmers will give portions of their crops to the temples that support the spiritual seekers and things like that. And through this, they built this beautiful social system to help support everybody. When I was spending time in the Sikh community, in Punjab, most people are farmers and they all donate a large portion of their crops to their local gurdwara. And this gurdwara, they offer free meals 3 times a day to anybody. You can just come and you can eat. And so it offers like a social safety net for those that may not have enough food that month. And it also offers community. So I like to think of Hinduism like a river. It has something for everybody. everybody. On the edges, it's shallow banks, you know, like children, they can dip their toes in and they can get wet and they can kind of explore. But it also has deep, rich depths that you can explore. But no matter where you get in the river, it'll still carry you to the ocean of oneness. And so Hinduism is so diverse and there's such a wide collection of ideas. It's really hard to go into everything all at once. So, but there's some key ideas. So as I mentioned before, Brahman is the universal source of everything. And within that universal source, we have our Atma, or our Atman, which is our individual souls. And our individual souls, you can think of them as a drop separating from the ocean. And in that separation, we enact what's called karma. And that's basically what Jesus says, you shall reap what you sow. So good and bad, you're putting your vibrations and your actions out into the world, and everything has to come into balance. And the goal of Hinduism is for moksha, or liberation. And moksha, or liberation, is to realize your oneness with all of creation, but also to free yourself from suffering. I heard a really beautiful analogy. Somebody was talking about, how can you free yourself from suffering? You know, what does that mean and what does that look like? And he described it as saying, we can all watch a movie, and the movie can be beautiful, emotional, it can draw us to tears, and we can really live and feel that experience while we're watching that movie. But as soon as the movie's over, we're no longer suffering because we know it's a movie. We're not attached to the outcome of it. You know, it may stay with us, it may invoke all these feelings of joy, happiness, and sorrow, but we know that they're not ours to carry and to keep and to hold on to. And a lot of us do that every day in our life. Somebody says something that we don't like, you know, we carry it with us and it ruins our entire day. So the idea of moksha and liberation and freeing yourself from suffering is to develop non-attachment. You know, so I'll talk about that a little bit more with Krishna. But the idea is to not become attached to the outcome of things. You know, many people operate and move through this world saying, I'm going to do this so I can get this, you know, and it's always this like back and forth. And even people with good intentions, they're trying to do good things. They're doing it with the attachment of, I want good things to come back to me. And in that process, you're creating more karma still. Good karma, but you're still creating karma, which is going to keep you bound up in the cycle of birth and death and have you coming back more and more. So the idea is to kind of break free from all of that. And the main key point is to practice non-attachment. Now, another idea in Hinduism is called Dharma. And Dharma is basically your purpose of life. Krishna Das, who we listened to in the introduction music, he had a beautiful saying. It was either him or Ram Dass. They said it's better to do your Dharma imperfectly than to do somebody else's Dharma perfectly. And what that means is you have to walk your path and you have to live your life. You can't, you know, find somebody else and say, I'm going to live their life, because you could live their life perfectly. You can do everything that you see them doing and do it 100 times better than them and be perfect in every sense of the word, but you're not living your life. You're not living your experience. And that's what we came here for. As souls, we came here to live our own experiences, to find our own joys. So we got the cycles of time, which is like a reoccurring thing. So there's 4 cycles. Then we have the Trinity, which we're getting into now with Krishna. So in Hinduism, there's Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. So Brahma is the creator, Vishnu is the sustainer, and Shiva is the destroyer. So they believe in the beginning of time, Brahma creates everything. Vishnu, who is, Krishna is an incarnation of sustains everything. So he kind of preserves everything as it is. And then Shiva, he does the Tandava dance at the end of time, destroying all of creation so it can be started again. These cycles last about 4.32 billion years, and that's all considered to be half of a day for Brahma. So these gods live in a completely different time. On the other side, you have Saraswati, Lakshmi, and Durga, who are the divine consorts of the masculine side of the Trinity. And each of these gods and goddesses have taken on many different forms. So Ganesh. So Ganesh, let's talk about him. There's a nice family photo of him and his mother and his brother Kartikeya, and you see Ganesh with the elephant head. Ganesh is the son of Shiva, and Shiva's is the king of the yogis. So he was off in the mountains doing his yogi thing, doing meditation. And his wife Parvati said, I really want a son. I really want a child. You know, so she created Ganesh, they said from turmeric. Some people say she formed him from clay and gave him life. And one day she was going to take a bath and she said to her son Ganesh, guard my path and do not let anybody pass so I can preserve my modesty. And Ganesh, never seeing his father Shiva at this point, and Shiva never knowing his son Ganesh, they meet on the road. And as Shiva's trying to go see his wife Parvati, Ganesh says, no, I will not let you pass. And he kept trying to stop him at every single way. And this angered Shiva, so he chopped off his head. And then he went to go see his wife. And when his wife comes and sees her son with the head on the ground, she's like, you fool, what did you do? You just killed our son. I am super mad at you. And of course, going to be the good husband and restore the family balance, and says, okay, I got to fix this. I got to make it right. Now, there's a couple different ideas how he got his head. So some say the god Brahma said you have to find an animal that's sleeping with their head facing north and use that head. Other people say the elephant was the closest thing to Shiva, and she was like, let me just put this head back on there. But either way, the elephant head is very symbolic of immense wisdom. Ganesh is known as the remover of obstacles, so he removes those which block our path. In the system of our chakras, our energy centers, Ganesh is the Muladhara, or our root chakra. And he is kind of like the basis of everything. As part of like the appeasement of his wife, Shiva said, you know, I know I did really bad, but I'm going to make it up to you, and I'm going to make it up to Ganesh. So anytime that there's a ritual or any kind of ceremony, Ganesh is to be worshipped first. And so that's why in many of the Hindu traditions, Ganesh is always invoked first, because one, he'll remove the obstacles that'll hinder the proper performance of the ritual. But because of this blessing from Shiva, he's honored in that way.